Edge Radio.
Hello, folks. This is Wayne Brown on the Talkie Show. And as you'll notice, it's just myself. Each fortnight, I do a stream where it's just me. I pick a subject and I talk about it. I also invite people, if they've got any questions, to send them in, and I'll answer them live on air. I can see your comments here, so make sure you send them in. Tonight, I've picked an interesting subject, shall we say, and I got reminded of this recently because I heard a chap that I knew years ago is currently going through a divorce, and it made me, well, it didn't make me, it gave me a pause and allowed me to recall the way I behaved years ago when I was going through my two divorces. So I've got a little bit of experience in this, and I've also had a few breakups. And with breakups and divorces, I think there's a few things that we don't do that we should. And there's also some things that we do that we maybe shouldn't. And also there's things that we should do a little bit differently. So that's what I want to explore tonight. So when we have a breakup, generally a lot of people, they get fixated on things like the finances. They're worried about they're going to lose their house, their super, et cetera, et cetera. And that is a legitimate fear. I don't want to downplay that because a lot of people, especially people that are getting later in their years, when they go through a divorce, that's a lot of security that suddenly evaporates. So it's a very real fear. The nice thing, I suppose, about that is you can, to a reasonable degree, recover your finances, because as long as you've got the ability to earn and you understand how to make your money work for you, things like the finances don't ultimately become a massive problem. They just become more of a challenge. The things that we don't tend to deal with are things like the things that go on in our head, our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, our responses, the way we deal with our perception of the way we are going through that breakup or that divorce. There's the physical side of it, and there's also the emotional side of it. So these are the things I want to explore tonight, because once you start dealing with those things, the rest of it becomes easier. And the reason is, if your body is losing a lot of energy through worry about various things, replan scenarios and dialogues and potential outcomes, and you've also got unprocessed emotions, that creates a lot of weight and heaviness in your body, and that makes it very hard to function on a day-to-day basis. So if you deal with those things, it becomes easier to deal with the other things, because your body and your brain and your emotions have got one less thing to deal with. So the easier you can make it for those parts of yourself, the easier it is for the rest of it. So I want to go through these step by step, and I'll use my own experience, having been through this twice. The first time, it was very much a very raw scenario, because there was custody of children involved and court hearings and all of this sort of thing. So that took a very heavy toll. And unfortunately, there were a lot of things that I didn't know, so I couldn't deal with those things. By the time I got to my second divorce, which was, I don't know, 15 years later, it was easier because I understood some things a little better. So I didn't buy into certain things as much. So therefore, it was easier to move past that and get on with my life. So I want to use, like I said, my life, my example, for you to learn from. And hopefully you haven't been through anything like I have. And if you have, my condolences, because it sucks. If you've got any questions while I'm talking, pop them in the comments on the feed, and I'll get to them. Otherwise, if the live feed has finished and you want to send a question or any sort of comment, feedback, etc., the talkietalkieshow at gmail.com, and then I can respond or answer it on air for the next show. So I want to deal with, first of all, the emotions, because the emotions drive a lot of things without us being aware of it, usually because we're not generally good at understanding our emotions. So there's certain things that occur after a breakup or after a divorce that we don't tend to do. Now, one of the big ones is grief. Now, this is one that I realized a number of years ago, and I had to go back and revisit the ending of my relationships and my marriages so that I could then release them. So it's not so much of a get out of my life type release. It's a, I have gratitude now for what I went through. Now I can let it go. So grief is what I call a complex emotion. It's made up of a lot of emotions, and it's one of these things that's not linear. So when you are going through a grieving process, it is not linear. You don't go shock and then anger and then sadness, and it's all at once at different intensities, and then some of them back off and they come back later. So your emotions are very much fluid. So initially, you will go through things like shock, um, anger, frustration, resistance, denial. All of these things exist at a breakup. And it's because we have a certain perception of the world, and that perception has now been shattered and changed. And the fact that that's sometimes shattered it massively makes it hard to process some of these things, because you'll believe something is a certain way and then suddenly it gets pulled from under you. Like when I first married, I thought, I've, I'm married now, we've made the vows, we've made the promise, we're going to work on this. And when she said she was leaving, I begged her to go and do counseling and all of this, but she'd already checked out. So she'd been dealing with it for a year or so. And for me, I had that shock. So it dropped me to my knees for a couple of days. And then I started to get my act together and process some of the emotions. And being able to understand them, which I didn't do in the first time, I did better the second time, was understanding that grieving, the sadness, the anger, the frustrations, the disappointments, the betrayal. You have a sense of betrayal because you've made this commitment. We're going out together, we're married, whatever it is. And then suddenly that gets ripped from under you and you feel betrayed. So there's a lot of emotions to process, and grief's just one of them. You've then got all sorts of other fears and concerns about the future, what's going to happen, what'll happen. Will I get another partner? Will I get past this one? Will I recover financially, emotionally, mentally? All of these things go on in your head. So the emotions is a massive thing. I could write a book on it, and I actually have, but more on that later. So if you take the emotions to one side for the moment, we're now going to look at the mindset. So, like I said, you've got all of these emotions that challenge our perceptions. And when we go into a relationship, one of the things we don't tend to do is ask enough questions to get clear on where this is going, and also what happens if it goes wrong. There's a question that I used to coach people on. You get a lot of people that are told or instructed, if you're out on a date with someone, you don't ask them about their ex. A lot of people will proffer that to you. However, I'm of the mindset of you should ask them, because how they respond will indicate to you how they cope with a breakup. So if it's with a lot of anger and resentment and they stalk their partner, they're all massive red flags where you should get the hell out, because that's how they're going to behave when they split up with you. If they're very mature about it and saying, yeah, we just weren't a good match, I see them now and then, we say hi, have a quick chat, and we get on our way, then you've got someone who understands their emotions, they can work with them, they tend to be more stable, more mature, and that's a green flag. So when we go into a relationship, we will have certain perceptions. I'm in a relationship now, it's stable, we're monogamous, we're committed, all of these things, especially when you get married, you make the vows and you spend a lot of money for one day. and you believe that it's going to work. So if you've got that perception and they've got a different perception that you don't know about, that can lead to problems, especially when you get to the split. So understanding the way that the entire thing's structured, who does what, who gets what, who contributes what, having those conversations will make a breakup, if it happens, make it a lot easier. And in a way, you should almost have a discussion. What happens if we break up? You know, are we going to be amicable? Are we going to be nice about this? Because the one thing I've learned or realized from my own experiences is if you break up with someone, if you take that opportunity to learn about how to do relationships better, how to present yourself, what you contribute to a relationship, what you should, what you shouldn't, those sorts of things, if you can learn something from those, that relationship has been beneficial. And that makes a nice segue to my second marriage. Now, my second marriage was a very toxic relationship. I got to the point where I thought, this woman that's very insecure and thinks I'm having affairs and all sorts of things, if I marry her, surely that'll make her think, well, he's committed. He's not going to fool around. It'll all be good. And it changed nothing. So if you're thinking of marrying someone to help them feel better, don't do it. It's not a good move. So when that broke down a few years after we married and I decided to leave, that woman who had been very toxic, very aggressive, controlling, manipulative, all of these negative labels she'd been to me for years, all of that vanished when I realized the whole time we were together, she was trying to give me a gift. Now, this is a metaphorical gift, not a literal gift, before you start thinking, well, maybe that's her love language. No, it was one of those things where her behavior. Oh, thank you, Travis. Absolutely agree. I'm hoping that means you're agreeing to everything. So, with her, she was giving me this gift, a challenge, an opportunity to become more than I was. Now, I didn't see that because I didn't know about it. Again, you don't know what you don't know. So, I didn't know about that until after we separated. And I was doing a process with a chap with some men's work, a weekly men's group. And I got this lesson finally. And literally, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I felt lighter. I felt clearer. I suddenly had a clear idea of where I was going with my growth because of receiving that lesson finally. So, if you are going through or have been through a breakup or a divorce, go back and revisit it. Because if you can look at it and there's no weight to it, there's no heaviness, there's no so-called negative emotions, then you're clear to move forward. You've obviously got everything you need from it. But if remembering it, going back and revisiting it, gives you some sort of frustration, disappointment, anger, whatever, there could be a lesson you still need to get. And when you get that, it'll make you a better person. Now, if you don't get the lesson, you're more than likely going to repeat it, which is what tends to happen and why my second marriage was so much more volatile than my first, because I didn't get the lesson. The universe decided to up the ante and make it so much more intense. Now, if you don't get the lessons and you go to repeat it, it doesn't matter how long you wait until you get back into the dating market, you won't be able to find someone with whom you can create a high quality relationship because you need that lesson still. So you'll attract that person again. So for me, once I got that lesson, my next partner was a quantum leap from where I was, so that there was a lot less frustration and everything like that. Now, sadly, I did bring in some of my old habits, which then corrupted the relationship, and I had to end that one as well. However, I did get that another big lesson, which gave me more clarity again. So therefore, when I finally met my wife, I had a couple of speed humps at the start. However, for the most part, it's been dramatically different. So because I finally received that lesson fully, I was able to then move on, which has lightened my emotions. It's lightened my mindset and changed the way I see a lot of things. Physically, I feel a lot lighter and better within myself. So receiving all of those allowed me to get past the divorce and the breakup and all of the mental and emotional and financial stuff that comes along with it. So I'm not far off where I would have been had I not been divorced. So it is all recoverable no matter where you're at. In fact, if I was really honest, the money's been like the least of my problems. So if I had to do it over again, I would focus on my internal part, my physical, my mental, and my emotional to be able to move through it faster. So if you're doing that, focus on your mental, your physical, and your emotional and your energy levels. So make sure you get enough sleep and you do some exercise or moving of some sort, all of the usual stuff that they say about keeping yourself healthy. All right. So we've got a comment here from Linda Moore. Good subject. It's hard with separation and divorce. Unless you have been through it, I'm having trouble reading that a little bit. If you're having trouble learning from a universal lessons are blessings, yes, they are. It takes times in growth and rebuilding. Afterward, healing is needed. Very spot on conversation. Thank you very much, Linda. It's nice to have that little bit of feedback. And it is something that I believe wholeheartedly. If I could take a part of my brain and give it to someone who was going through a divorce or a separation, it would definitely be about focusing on those. Because if you're healthy, your mindset has clarity, it's powerful. If you've got your emotions under control, actually, I'll change that because you can't control your emotions. If you're interpreting your emotions correctly and getting the messages from your emotions, you will be able to move smoother through life. And if you're looking after yourself physically, it's just so much easier because your health is one of those things that when you lose it, it's hard to get back. So please look after your health. That's a really major one there. Um, so for me, that was one of the things that helped me. Now, someone did pop in a question in the comments before. When is it a good time to get back into the dating game after a divorce or a breakup? There is no hard and fast test. Even if you're not ready for it per se, you can still do a good job if you're open to the lessons. So if you understand that in a relationship, it's nothing to do with the other person. This took me ages to understand because you get people all the time will go, "Oh, I've met my soulmate. They make me complete." No one makes you complete. You are already complete. There are just parts of you that you've suppressed or disowned or ignored that you need to bring back in line so that you can be whole again or operating whole because it's all there. You've just got to bring it back in. So, changing your mindset on those sorts of things will make your next relationship so much easier if you're aware that your partner is meant to push your buttons. You're meant to have arguments because that's where the growth happens. When your button gets pushed, that's when you stand firm on your boundaries. That's where you will learn to negotiate an outcome where you both have a win. That's where you learn to listen to what the other person is wanting so that you can help them get what they want so that you can get what you want. Because if in a relationship, one partner's winning, so to speak, the other one's losing, that's not a good thing because if one of you is losing, you're both losing. So it's important that you're a team and working together. So having those moments of conflict where you have that opportunity to grow is a wonderful thing. Once you understand that that's where the growth happens, you almost get a little bit excited when you have a fight because even if it doesn't feel good in the moment, and sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does because you're making progress. afterwards, you will be able to go back and look at it and go, okay, what were the emotions I was going through? What memories was that dragging up? What was that eliciting within me that I haven't dealt with from my past that made that reaction so intense? So there's lots of things you can look at that allow you to get a better result. And that comes from those moments. So even if you're not ready for a relationship, you can make it a good relationship if you go into it with a good understanding of how relationships work and also a willingness to learn. Because you get some people, and we've all been guilty of this, where you think you know it. And the funny thing is I think it was Yoda that said, to know and not do is not yet to know. I think it was Yoda that said that. And that's very true. You can read all the books, but unless you put it into practice, it's not going to change anything. So if you're willing to put yourself out there and be open and look for that person who's also willing to be open, then you're laughing. In fact, I'll tell you a little bit of a story. When I was finding my next partner after my last relationship, I sat down and created what I call a dating template. So I basically, if you've seen the movie Weird Science, it's like that, where they put all their bits of a perfect partner into their computer and it created this perfect woman. It was what would I need my partner to be like, to look like, to act like, what would be their values, all of these sorts of things, and why. And so I created this list of what I wanted in a partner. And amazingly, my wife ticks pretty much everything, which is fantastic. However, I was very lucky because I got two things that I hadn't put on the list, which I now recommend that everyone should have on their list as a potential partner. So if you are currently single, you're looking at getting into another relationship, make sure you check that they have these two things, because if they've got just these two things and nothing else, you can still have a high quality relationship. First of all, they've got to be interested in growing. That means in 10 years, they've got to have 10 years of growth, not 1 year repeated 10 times. So you want someone who's becoming a better version of themselves every single year, every single month, every single day. You want them to be that little bit better than they were yesterday, same as what you are doing. So that's absolutely critical. The next one is they have to be able to own their shit, which means if they stuff up, if they say something wrong, if they make a mistake, if they forget something, they've got to be willing to go, yeah, I stuffed up. Now, of course, we're all going to have the habit, as we do sometimes, and I know I still do this occasionally, is we deny it. We go, no, it wasn't me. And that's okay as long as you recognize it and you can work on it. So if you have a partner has those two things and you also have those two things, it's possible for you to have a high quality relationship, even if you have a mismatch on just about everything else. So those things allow the growth. They're also, because together you're creating that environment, it also makes it easier for you to go back and revisit those previous relationships, the breakups, the divorces, all of that, so that you can deal with it. And if you've got a partner who is having those two values, it will be easier to have those discussions with that person and explore it with them if you feel the need. You don't have to, but it's if you feel a need. And that just reminded me of something. I remember when I first got with, I started dating my wife, I always or often almost fell into the trap of saying, you make me happy. And I used to say to her, you make it easy to choose being happy. And it used to annoy the Jesus out of her until I explained to her that it is the truth, though. She doesn't make me happy. She makes it easy to choose being happy. She makes it easy to choose feeling accepted and having worth and all of these sorts of things. So if you've got a partner where together you create that environment, you've got a good relationship. And that's what we should all be aiming for, where together we're creating something that's worth having. Now, after a divorce or a breakup, like I said, It's difficult financially, mentally, emotionally, physically, and all of these sorts of things. When I want to revisit again that question of when is it the right time to go dating again, I would give this advice to anyone who's out there looking for a partner. Do not go out there looking for a partner initially. Go out there to practice talking to people, practice working out if someone's right for you. Like when I went out looking for my wife, I met a lot of wonderful ladies, and I probably could have had a good relationship with them, but they weren't a good enough match. So they were just practice for me finding myself, learning to talk to people without telling jokes, without having to be accepted or anything. It was just me practicing being me. So if you can do that when you go out and just go up and talk to people, have a conversation, get to know them, ask questions, practice your questions, because you don't want to go up to people asking, "Oh, so what do you do?" You want to ask things that are interesting. You want to find out about them as a person, what's made them who they are, where they're going in their life, what the contributors are to their life, both positive and negative. You want to explore everything about the person, not what they do as a job, because who they are as a person will determine who they are as a partner. And if you show curiosity, that's going to be a really cool thing on your side. Then, after you've had some practice and you've started to discover yourself and become that little bit better version of yourself, then and only then should you start looking at dating. So if you break up and you start dating the first person you talk to, that might not necessarily be a good thing. So it's worth taking your time. Now, that doesn't mean you've got to take 10 years. Excuse me, but I do recommend not taking 10 minutes. It's one of those things where there's no hard and fast rule of, yep, I've ticked all these things, I'm ready to go. It's am I on track to be the best version of me and find the person who can help me create that world where I can be that best version of myself? So having that sort of thing also helps you get past the breakup and the divorce, because you are willingly and knowingly creating that relationship. You have a higher chance of actually achieving it and being part of it. And being part of a relationship where, or a team where you're creating that sort of relationship, is awesome, I can tell you. So if I had to break all of this down in the last couple of minutes, thank you, Bruce. Wise words. I like to think you're referring to all of it. Thank you very much. If I could leave you with a few pointers, if I had to sum everything up, if you're getting past a breakup or a divorce, remember it's not about you. When they broke up with you, or if you broke up with them, it's only what you contributed. So if you can look at that relationship and go, well, I did this, this, and this, and I shouldn't have done, and I didn't do these three things, and I should have done, well, then you've learned something. So if that relationship gives you something you can learn from, then you're ahead of the curve. But make sure you're learning something from it. Otherwise, you're not going to move on. If you want to move on quickly, that's the best way to do it. Go back, analyze it, look at it honestly, what you contributed and what you didn't contribute that made it a relationship that started well, didn't end up so good in the end. Because you've got to remember, all of our relationships start off good. We often forget that they do. They do, though. We picked that person for a reason, because they were going to push our buttons. They were going to challenge us to be that better version of ourselves. So if you take that challenge, become that better version of yourselves, that relationship was worthwhile. I mean, if I ran into my second wife now on the streets, I would definitely thank her for putting me on the path to become who I am. Anyway, we've reached the end of the show. Thank you for watching. Feel free to send your questions through. The replay will be on Sunday from 10 until 10:30. Next week, I'll have a guest. We'll be discussing permaculture. Other than that, look after yourself. Stay awesome. Send in your questions and take care. And this is Wayne Brown out. Excuse me while I press some buttons. See you next time. Take care.